Not everybody loves it, I'm sure.
I
Caleb.
love and get excited
Okay.
talking about what we do, but I dread the asking money part.
Yeah. So anybody else resonate with that?
Yeah.
You enjoy sharing about what you're doing, but you hate to ask.
Yep.
Courtney, tell me why that is.
I mean, I really do love what we do. I think I just have to get my beliefs right about the ask. I don't know. I just feel like it makes people uncomfortable, or I think there's some root reasons with just the mindsets that I grew up with that come into play, that the Lord's been working with me on that too. But I just hate asking, knowing that sometimes people feel uncomfortable or feel bad saying no. But I think I'm growing in my ability just to release them of that, like, I think I'm growing in my ability to deliver in a way that is better. But I don't know. I hate asking people for money, but I know it's a good reason. And I just feel bad every time I have to ask.
Who else say I struggle with the ask, and tell me why? Yeah, so this is my wife. Yeah, she didn't even want to take a salary from the church as pastor. She struggled with that. So it's just, so tell us why, sweetie.
Well, I think for me personally, it was, I think what Courtney said, it was kind of the way I was raised, that I needed to be, I have such a working, a drive to work, and that I didn't value sometimes what I did enough. And so that it created, for me, it was just more of a, I'm not worthy to receive that. And then I realized how hard the work is. And I also realized that there's not a lot of people standing in line willing to pastor churches or to go to universities.
Exactly.
And so you have to believe in the value of what God has called you to, and let go of that, because I think that you come to grips with, this is something God has asked of me, and I have to believe that it has value in the kingdom of God. But for me, it's probably more of a people-pleasing thing that I had to really wrestle with.
And you didn't want to feel dependent on anything either. She's super independent. Who else?
So I'd say, yeah, kind of the same things, but it's felt like it's mostly felt impolite to me. And like, like it goes against what you're kind of raised to do. So I think that's the hardest part.
I think for me, I struggle less with talking with individuals. And I just seriously struggle when it comes to pastors and churches, because I just don't know the balance of being too pushy and nagging, and then the frustration of just no responses. Especially when you run into pastors and they're telling you to call them, and then you can't get a response.
Yeah.
And
for
that's
real. That's the hardest. That is for me too. I literally have a pastor who in 2022 at Refresh said, "We're going to support you." I send him an email every month, and I call him every month, and I've literally not even heard a like, "Let me get back to you" or anything.
Yep. So that's exactly it. I mean, over the past year, I've had at least 3 or 4 of those that run into at council or sectional council, and they're like, "We want to support you. Call me. We'll set it up." And just can't get them to reply. And then again, like balancing I'm not a naggy, pushy kind of person, so like balancing. I ran into a pastor just this week at sectional council, and we were talking. He's like, he said something, and he just said, "Well, we're supporting you, right?" And I said, "Well, you kind of said you were a year ago, but no." And he's like, "Oh, why did you reach out again?" And I was like, "Well, I kind of did, but I just, again, that balance of, I want to be pushy enough that I get their attention, but not so much that they're dreading seeing me or hearing from me."
Yeah. So who else has had? Oh, Cindy, you have a hand raised. Do we need to call on you? Are you being the polite one? Or did you hit that by accident?
No, sorry, I'm taking kids to swim class. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah, I totally struggle with feeling like it's rude to ask because, that's how I was raised, but also I don't feel like I'm worth supporting. I'm like, I'm only part-time. I know me, so I know what I do. And I'm like, well, yeah, I wouldn't support me either. But it's easier when I ask with my husband because I'm like, well, everyone would support Jonathan because he's awesome. So it's just kind of a lot of self-esteem issues, but also knowing I'm part-time, my husband supports me. So I feel like I'm taking money from other people who need support more. So my situation's kind of weird, but it's a lot of others. But I have had people say, yes, we will support you. Churches, yes, call me. And then you never hear from them. So I've kind of had all of that.
Okay, I'm just trying to process all that. Hopefully I was never one of those pastors that didn't call you back.
You were not one of those, Gary, for sure.
I will say this, that early in my ministry was really hungry to be used of God in a greater way. And, I was praying, and I have a personal growth plan that I go through every year. And one of the things I was praying, Lord, I want to be used of you. I want to be used in a great way. What things can I do to be great for God? And the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, return your phone calls. Mm-hmm. I said, no, I want to do something great for you. I want to do something amazing. And no, just start by returning your phone calls. And so since then, hopefully I've been better at that. Yeah, good input. And as I said earlier, people power provision, provision, it's resources for the vision. And God has a plan for that, not bingos and bake sales, wealth creation, proportional giving, and a team approach that we're all in this together. Some have different roles on the team, but we're all on the team of the Great Commission. I totally understand the different kind of psychological roadblocks, and also things that happen in your life that can feed those roadblocks, like not return phone calls or people say offhand comments that devalue your work or any of that stuff that can kind of stick in your craw. And we live in an independent culture that frowns on people asking for money and all that. I totally get that. But the kingdom model is that not everybody can do everything, and that the labor's worth is higher. So, and the flip side of it is that there are those people who are gifted and called to support ministries. It's their passion. And so we do rob them of that opportunity by not asking them and not making them aware that, hey, we're doing something here that not a bunch of other people are doing, and I want to afford you that opportunity. So there's also been people who have abused it, and we all know that there are people over time that take advantage of people, and so that creates a stigma that you gotta move through. But I think some of the things we'll talk about will help alleviate that, and then at any moment you can chime in and share any thoughts. So let's start here. Now I'm going to do an experiment and share with you my screen, and I want,
Click that little button right there.
what button needs to go?
And share. You want your desktop shared?
I want that shared.
And you can
Right
share.
here.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then click share.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Now you can. Okay.
Yep,
Support
we see it.
raising in churches. First thing I would say this is that people, when they give, this is a hierarchy of reasons why they give. Number one, they give to relationships they trust. And so cultivating those relationships and creating a ministry that people trust giving to is super important. The second thing they'll give to is vision that they resonate with. Even if they don't know you, if you share a vision they resonate with, they'll give. The very last reason people give is need. That's why you see successful organizations often don't need to fundraise much, because it's not that they don't have a need. You look at these big college endowments are millions and billions of dollars, but money still keeps pouring in. They don't have any need, but people have relationships, and it's a vision that they buy into. So when I'm sharing about a vision that I want to fundraise for, I try to avoid the word need. We need this, or I need this support, or I need X amount. I use a different tack that I think accomplishes the same thing, but I try to shy away from that word need. I want to invite them to something bigger. So we'll go right down the list here. First, let's talk about relationships. People are the only conduit for wealth. Therefore, our relationships are a large factor in our productivity. So wherever I go, I'm trying to be aware of this. Not that I'm building relationships so that I can make more money, but favor travels through people. When we say, Lord, I need your favor, favor travels through people. So connecting with people is super important. And in that process, you honor other people. And then if you can honor other people, they'll honor your ministry. They'll honor what you're doing. Now, in our world, pastors are key. And for most of them, they're ruled by what I call the tyranny of the urgent. What urgent thing in the moment is ruling them? It's what that's in front of them right now. Just got a phone call, so-and-so died, or this marriage is in trouble, or this person's struggling, or we had a pipe burst at the church. Whatever the urgent thing is in the moment, most pastors are fighting this. The good ones have a way of arranging their lives so that they're not ruled by the urgent. They're ruled by a vision and a plan that they're implementing, and they create systems to deal with urgencies. And there's still a percentage of their time, because people don't die on your schedule, and people aren't in crisis on your schedule. So they're often ruled by the tyranny of the urgent. And urgent things are different to different people. I'm going to show you this example. I don't know if you can see this. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Can you all see that? So these are 2 prayer cards that came in the same week. People are praying for certain things. So the top one, somebody wrote they want hot chocolate in the cafe and shorter ministry time or shorter services. So this was their prayer. Give me hot chocolate and shorter church. And then the bottom one,
That's awesome, man.
my mom is going to prison for 4 years and I don't know I'm having a really hard time with it. And so you see the dichotomy of needs that pastors are dealing with at any given week.
Yeah.
The span of those 2 things. And so when you're a ministry like yourself, it's easy in the mind of a pastor to be out of sight, out of mind. Your ministry is in front of you all the time. And I think it should be. I want you on that campus on a regular basis. I want you prayer walking. I want you meeting students. I want you there. That should be a part of your DNA. When you go to sleep at night, you should be thinking about that campus and those students. But it's not going to be for those pastors and those people in their churches, because they got a kid who wants hot chocolate and a mom who's going to prison. And that happens
Daily.
on a daily basis. Those kind of things that they're dealing with. Now, it doesn't mean that they're absolved of responsibility of returning a phone call or keeping a commitment. I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to give you a little context of kind of what's going on behind the scenes. And so with all that in mind, understand this is the first thing about these relationships and your relationship to the pastors in our network. And that is, to them, you are the message. You are the Chi Alpha brand. Every one of you carries that mantle. And for some, they may encounter 1 or 2 Chi Alpha leaders in a year, and they represent all of Chi Alpha for the whole country. So this is kind of a burden for any leader, not just a missionary, but any leader has this mantle that they have to carry, that I am the message. And as a young leader, I had to learn to, I guess, grow in my ability to carry that message in different contexts and understand what context am I in, and then how should I carry the message in this context. There's a verse that sticks out to me. So in 1 Samuel chapter 16, David gets hired by King Saul to be a palace musician. You guys remember this? Saul has anger issues, and David's a good musician, and when he plays, the demons don't like it. And so he's hired. He's in the king's palace. But then if you read a few verses later, this is the David and Goliath narrative. It said that David's brothers were in the full-time army, but David would go back and forth from service of Saul to what would he do on the weekends? You remember?
Yeah, bring food to his brothers.
Yeah, so he'd bring food to his brothers from where?
The shepherd, the sheep, I think.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
exactly. So at any given moment, his context would be he's with the sheep,
Yeah.
the shepherd, or he's in the king's palace as a palace musician. Do you think he changed to represent the message in different contexts? So at any given moment, he could be in the king's palace and represent himself well, or as a shepherd and represent himself well, or as a lunch lady delivering lunch. Now, do you think he dressed the same as a shepherd as when he went into the king's palace? Likely not. He had this understanding that he was representing a message. And so I learned to grow that. I grew up pretty poor, and I was so poor we had to put holes in our own jeans. We didn't have those fancy ones that came pre-messed up. And
Right.
so I had to learn that in different contexts that there's different unwritten rules in different contexts. And if you don't know the unwritten rules, you're not going to represent the message well. And so I just learned those things, that when I'm around lead pastors, this is how I dress and act. When I'm around students, this is how I dress and act. When I'm around the sheep or when I'm in the palace, I represent the message wherever I'm at. So I'll give you, for instance, for me, when I go to district council or network council, especially the ordination service, even though I got ordained years ago, I always wear a coat or coat and tie. And this time I was putting it on, and my wife's like, why are you wearing a coat? I said, because I want to honor the moment. I want to honor those people who are getting ordained. I want to honor the moment, and in whatever small way I can do that. And so when we go to network council, it's like going to the palace, and there's a lot of lead pastors there, and we represent the message. And I am the message. I don't even have a message. I embody it. And so when I go to speak at any church, I get the dress code, and I always go one notch nicer than the dress code. Also in Samuel, the verse that says God looks at the heart, but men look on the outside. And sometimes people will use that verse and say, well, God knows my heart. Therefore, I can be a slacker because God knows my heart. No. I'm not trying to raise support from God. I already have God's support. I'm trying to raise support from men who do look on the outside to some extent. And so when I come to any speaking engagement, I get the dress code. I always go one notch nicer, because I know that because I don't have relationship with those people, I don't have any credibility with those people. And if I can use how I present myself right away, because you got about 10 seconds to make a first impression,
Exactly.
then I can earn, just by how I dress, earn a little credibility. And I'll take everything that I can get, even before I open my mouth. So we do this with job interviews. We do this with all this stuff. So I had to learn to carry the mantle that I am the message. So, when I look in the mirror, and Chris, when we were with you on a couple of weeks ago, you said, I know God has somebody better than me for this, but right now I'm it. And I think we can all say that. We can all think, am I really the person that God has for this assignment? And the answer is yes, you are it. You are the message. And so what does that mean? It means that we come as we are, but we continue to grow into who God has called us to be. And any thoughts on that?
That's amazing.
I want the young bucks and the young does to have their chance. I don't want to just talk all the time.
We're looking through, make sure everybody's good. And you can unmute anytime,
Yeah, you guys can stay unmuted.
unless you're chewing, you don't have to.
No thoughts on that? I would say if you honor the moments and people, then they'll tend to honor your mission. Honor the
Yeah.
moments and people will tend to honor your mission.
Yeah. It's good.
Okay, now I'm going to answer the big question. What do pastors want from you? Especially when you finally can get a service. What do they want from you? And here's how I would summarize it. They want you to provide the church a window into your world and then invite us passionately to do something great for God. That's how I would summarize that.
Mhm.
Give us a window into your world and then invite me to do something great for God. Whether that's a sermon or a window, I would run any of your communication through this grid. How can I invite them into my world? How can I provide a window, show them what we're doing, how we're doing it, and then how can I passionately invite them to do something great for God? Now I'm going to unpack this here
Great.
in a little bit. So here's how I would look at windows and sermons. And sermons to me are just expanded windows with some scripture tossed in for context and teaching.
Yeah.
Tell a story and then invite us into the story. So the story's purpose is you're going to give us a window into your world. And then at the end of that story, you're going to invite us into the story. That's inviting us to do something great. So your story should embody something great and then invite us to be a part of that. So when you think about the ask, I'm not asking, I'm inviting you to be a part of something great. And everybody wants to be a part of something great. If
Right.
one of your campuses, let's say it's Wayne State, all of a sudden has like the best football team in the country. They're beating all the Big Ten schools. They're beating everybody.
Good luck.
And then Chris has tickets, 50-yard line. He probably wouldn't have a hard time getting people to get in on those tickets because he's inviting them to something great. And so the ask is easier. In fact, if you can share the story to the point where people will ask, how can I be a part of this? It makes it way easier. So let me unpack this a little bit. The story should include these elements. And this is like any good story. Characters, a setting, conflict or tension, a redemptive element where you are a key character in bringing that redemptive element, and an invitation. How can the audience be a part of making a difference? And so looking further here. So the characters, when you introduce a story, you introduce the characters. But if you watch great storytellers like Spielberg and these others that are producing movies that everybody goes to, the characters aren't often introduced on the screen with a picture of your prayer card that's 3 years old, and your kids have grown a foot since they were on the prayer card, and says, "This is my wife, Kim, and these are our 4 kids." In a story, the characters aren't introduced that way. They begin to develop as part of the story. So you and your family are introduced early in the story, but it's part of the story. And so I could share, for instance, how my wife and I met in church. And then when I got to the point, my wife, she happens to be there. I could, if I was sharing my story, to share about how lost I felt when I went to Ypsilanti, Michigan, alone. I didn't really know anybody. I had a mattress on a floor and a black and white TV, and then I was a new young youth pastor there, and in walks this girl who caught my eye. And so I introduced our family as part of the story, not as a prayer card. This is my wife and my kids who have gone through puberty since they took this. You understand kind of what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
I'm going to lay a framework here, and then you guys can put the flesh and blood on it with your own story. Students you have encountered on campus are characters in the story. Or if you say, man, I don't really have any students, then create an archetype of students you've encountered on campus. You know of students, or you have history with students, and you could say something like, this fall, Jennifer's going to show up on campus. Jennifer was raised in an Assembly of God church, but she's going to face temptations like she's never faced before. Or let's meet this man, Sandhu, who comes from India, and he doesn't know anybody. His nation is paying for him to show up to campus and to learn engineering and come back, and he doesn't know anybody. He comes from a Hindu background, but he's nominally Hindu, and he's searching. And so that's an archetype of a student that you all know, but you're inviting us into his story and then where you fit into that story. Everybody understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? Introducing characters?
Great.
All right.
That makes a lot more sense when I think about trying to present our mission to churches, because I'm usually thinking, okay, what's happened lately? What have I not already told? But using archetypes helps create opportunities, I guess, to share more broadly than I've met with these specific people, but it still paints the picture. So that's really helpful. So I appreciate the idea of stories, not just here's my kids, here are my kids, sorry. It's not just a list, it's creating a story and inviting people into it. That is really helpful. So thank you.
Awesome.
I think you can also add to that, when you're going to visit a place, one of the first questions I'll ask somebody if they ask me to come and speak is tell me about who I'm going to talk to. Tell me about the dynamics of your congregation, if I'm talking to the whole congregation, or if it's a group of women. I even like to know the age. Do I have a lot of families who are sending their students to college? Because now that gives me another, what might that mother be thinking, or what might that young person be thinking when I walk up there and talk about campus? Many of them are facing anxiety. And so knowing a little bit about who you're going to speak to, I think will also help you create that connection, to understanding that this is the vision that we have, that we're on the same page, that there's something I can invite you into and be a part of, I think is pretty helpful too.
Mm-hmm. When I speak outside of Living Hope, when I was there, I would often ask, what do you want me to leave your people with? What's your end game here? I want to serve that leader, the local pastor. What do you want me to leave them with? For me, when a missionary would ask me that, I say, I want you to leave them either laughing, crying, and broke. That was kind of my end game.
Yeah,
Invite them to something great. Let's talk about the setting. So you've got characters. Now I want you to paint a picture of your unique setting. And when I say unique, this is important. I've had missionaries come and share a good sermon on some theological topic that I could have done, and maybe even better. So I don't need that. I don't need a missionary to come in and share about their view on the Traducian origin of the soul. I can do that. I need you to do what only you can do, and that is bring you, unique you, and also your unique setting and your unique vision and work on the campus that you're at. So I can't do that. I can't come and share about Lake State or Wayne State or MSU. I can't come and share that. You can do that. And so you're bringing that, and I want you to open the window of your world to my congregation, because one of the biggest struggles that my congregation has is nearsightedness. They're ruled by what is in front of them most of the time. That's why missions is challenging in the American context, because Americans are notoriously myopic. They just see what's in front of them. If you just give them a geology or geography quiz, you see this. One of the things I like to ask Americans is just name the president of Canada or Mexico. And most of them can't, because they don't think about any other country but their own, any other world but their own. And then where I'm from in northern Michigan, people come to northern Michigan to get away from all that stuff. So they're even more myopic. So come and open their eyes a little bit. Give me a window into that world. And when we have toured each of your campuses, what we loved and found fascinating is that every campus has a DNA. Every campus has its own lore. Every campus has its own focus and its own culture. Bring us into that. Bring us into that world as part of your setting. And, you know, when I come to campuses, I like seeing the heroes of the campus. The heroes of the campus are the ones they made monuments to. And that tells me something about the DNA of the campus. Why are they making a monument to this person? Who is Wayne of Wayne State? You know, and why is Sparty here? So that opens my world and helps me get a finger on the pulse. Now, these are things that you take for granted because you walk past those monuments every day. Well, the people that you're preaching to don't know that setting. Bring them into that world. Give me a historical fact. Give me something about the DNA, the student numbers, iconic places on campus. Weave that into your story. Sandu's going to walk by Sparty when he comes on campus. He's not going to understand, you know, whatever context or whatever meaning. He's going to walk by this or that row of housing at Lake State that was barracks, that was for military post. Weave that in, and I think it will help bring interest to the story. Any thoughts on that? Painting the picture of the setting? All right, I don't hear anybody. Guys still awake out there? Hide your head or something. No, are you still awake?
Oh, yeah.
Northern Lights looking pretty good behind you. Okay,
No,
so
I think a lot of this is just good to process, because like I'm just introspectively thinking about how I do that stuff, or not what you're suggesting, but I'm trying to figure out, like, when I'm support raising and when I'm talking to people, what do I do? I'm trying to remember back because now it's been a couple of years, and then I'm trying to think of how I incorporate, or do I incorporate, or what is a way I can incorporate the things that you're talking about.
Sure.
So I think
That's
that's
fair.
probably like why you might be encountering silence, because I think we're just processing it, but I don't want to speak for everyone else.
Yeah, and I will pause to say this right here, is that our goal is to lay this framework. Again, you guys are going to have to put the flesh and blood on it for your own context, but also Kim and I are available and want to help you as you're formulating these things, as you're writing your sermons, as you're writing all this stuff. Then we can help you and coach you to come up with some things, or a way that I would share that story in a more personal, more one-on-one coaching. So this is more group. I'll toss the seed out there, and then if you message us and say, hey, I'm formulating the story, then I can help you put something together and coach you on the delivery. And Kim's a great communicator in her own right. So that when you leave that church, whether it's 15 people or 1,500 people, you will be able to carry that stage, and that you will be able to command that respect that your vision deserves. So we can help you with that. Nobody can do that without practice. I had a guy tell me, he's a young pastor. He just took a church, and I was mentoring him. And I preached a sermon. I finished the sermon, and I finished with communion. And I painted the picture of the marriage supper of the Lamb just before we took communion. And it was powerful. And then he told me the next day, he's like, I couldn't believe how at the end there, just off the cuff, you just rattled off this picture of the marriage supper of the Lamb. And I looked at him, I said, there's nothing off the cuff about it. I worked on that for 2 weeks solid. just the last 10 minutes of that sermon I worked on for 2 weeks. So don't think that if it comes off naturally that the guy speaking or girl speaking, it happened spontaneously. It doesn't for me. So there's a lot of preparation, a lot of practice that goes into this. And I just want to say that Kim and I are available to help you guys, coach you through all that, and do some good.
Yeah, Carrie, I'll say this too, just to add to what you're saying. You know, you talked about the three elements: the relationship, the vision, and the need. And what Pastor Carey's talking about with you guys is really being able to craft and then articulate your vision and the story. And that's essential for where you guys are at, because most of us in the Zoom call have been in Chi Alpha less than 10 years. Some of you as staff less than 5. And so you don't have relationship, you know? So vision is most important. It's always most important in my mind, no matter what stage of life I'm at. But for example, you could raise support from your grandma, and let's say you've got a great relationship with grandma, she loves you. I mean, she's going to support you even if your vision sucks. I mean, if you write a book, buy it, right? Relationship trumps the vision in that, but you guys just don't have credibility yet because you're young. And the way you're going to build credibility is what Carrie's teaching. It's vision, it's crafting the story well and communicating it well. And so I just think what you're saying, Carrie, is essential. That second piece of the puzzle when you're new in Chi Alpha. I mean, again, it's always important. And I try to make it visionary when I speak too. But man, when you're starting out and no credibility, vision goes a long ways in making up for a lack of relationship, for sure.
Right. And how you present yourself with your dress and demeanor starts that relationship credibility right away too. Remember, you embody the message, you carry the weight of that message wherever you go. So until you earn that credibility, you got a guy like Trey Hancock, he can show up in overhauls and that's him, right? He's a Southern boy, but he's earned the credibility with 30 years working with Muslims in Dearborn that
Right.
we want to listen to what he has to say if we're interested in reaching Muslims. You know what I mean? So, all right. So we got the character, the setting. Now this is a really, really key part here that you don't want to minimize. And that is conflict and tension. It's what makes any story good. Every story, no matter how tame it is, whether it's Bambi or Frozen or whatever it is, you always have to have some kind of conflict or tension. If there's no conflict or tension, there's nothing that draws you into it. So here are some things I thought of that are built into your ministries that are conflict and tension for the people that you'll be speaking to. One, there are students that are going to university, coming out of a church context and leaving their faith. That is something that is creating internal conflict in the people's lives that you're talking to. Their children and their grandchildren have been raised in church, and they're being swept away into the Babylonian culture when they leave. And that's a big frustration. It's a big frustration for youth pastors, for parents, grandparents. And so I like this phrase. I went to a church, when I was a presbyter, I went to a church that was without a pastor for 4 years. And they liked it. They liked not having a pastor because they were comfortable. They had fill-in preachers, and preachers from North Point Bible College would come in and, they would kind of cheer them on. And it was a group of maybe 8 to 10 people in this church. They paid their bills and they didn't want a pastor. And so I had to create a tension in them to change, because people will only change for a few reasons. One, they hurt enough to have to, they learn enough to want to, or they love enough to choose to. And so I had to reach down into something that they loved to get them to change. And I chose 2 things: one, legacy, and grandchildren. And so I came to them and I said, do any of you have any kids or grandkids that maybe don't live near you, that aren't walking with the Lord? And yeah, most people do. And so they said, yeah, we do. I said, do you pray for those? You pray for your kids? You pray for your grandkids? Oh yeah, we're praying for them. I said, you pray that God would send them believers, godly people, thriving, healthy churches to invite them into their context. Yeah, we want them to get involved in a good church where they live. We want them to know people who love the Lord. And I said, would you be willing to be that kind of church for people that live in your area, that have grandmas and parents praying for them? Would you be willing to be that kind of church? Because right now you're very isolated and you're not that kind of church. Would you be willing to be that kind of church that you're praying for your kids and grandkids? And they started looking for a pastor. They had a pastor, and a couple months after that,
Wow.
because they realized that there was an internal tension that I tapped into, and I was able to bring a redemptive picture to that for them. So you have this built in because the culture is very anti-God, and the center of that place are the university campuses. So in your context, you can say, do you wish someone would have reached out to those students on campus and invited them to a life of destiny? Yeah, I wish somebody, when my child went to MSU and walked away from it, I wish somebody would have invited them to be a part of a healthy Christian group instead. And then you could finish just by simply saying, I want to be that person. Would you help me be that person? So you're creating conflict tension. You're bringing a redemptive end to that tension with you as the hero of the plot. And who doesn't want to support the hero, right? Everybody wants to support the hero. Here's another tension. The culture is becoming more pagan by the day, and the university campus is the center of that. So anybody know who said this? The philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of the government in the next.
It's true. Gary Waldy said it.
No, wasn't me. You could just throw out names like Mark Twain, you'd be mostly right. You know what I mean? So Abe Lincoln said this.
All right.
The philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of the government in the next. And so everyday Joe Christian sitting in the pew and the pastor, especially during election seasons, are ruining the day of our government and the factions and the situations that are happening politically. And what they need to see is that the tension is happening in our realms of indoctrination, in our high schools and our universities.
That's true.
That if they want to see an awakening in our nation, the campus is going to be one of the epicenters of that. And so that's a relieving of that tension, and I would not be ashamed to tell them that. It really is. The ideas that they're facing today that are causing ruin, and this is kind of one of the next ones, come out of an academic environment. So number 3, people are broken because they thought they could live by Babylon's rules and not have any problems and not have any consequences. And so people are coming into that pastor's world every day. And so, Lance, this is, when we spoke to you, you said you had a pastor tell you, I don't see how your work should be my responsibility. This is how your work should be his responsibility, because people are coming into his church every day and every week that are broken. And the reason they're broken is because they lived by lies. They bought into lies and they made decisions based on things that are not true. And when you do that, things break. Their lives break, their marriages break, jobs break, whatever. And so it's the false ideas that are the strongholds, the Bible says. Any idea that is lifted up against the knowledge of God. Well, what is a university? It's a center for ideas. And so if you get false ideas in a nation's centers of learning and impartation, you're going to get false ideas downstream in the culture. So philosophy is lived around the kitchen table. It's lived in the bedroom. It's lived in the living room. What we think about the ideas in life are lived in our everyday spaces, but that's not where we get those ideas. Those ideas are upstream. And so, for instance, we're dealing with all kinds of questions of sexuality and what's it mean to be human these days around the kitchen table and around the schoolroom, high schools, junior highs. those ideas have filtered to that level. But where did they come from? They came from guys like Foucault, and actually there's a lady who was a university professor who started queer theory. So the ideas begin at high level, then they filter through the mid-level, the level of the arts. So we learn our philosophy often through the Pied Pipers, our musicians, our movies, TV shows, YouTube creators, through the arts, and then they're lived out at our kitchen table and in our living room. So the ideas that are being walked in, embodied by broken people in the church, start often at the university campus. And if you can connect those dots with that tension, so the phrase I like to use is ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims. And so another analogy I use is that pastors are putting out fires, but someone has to go and find out who's starting the fires. On the campus is where the fires of those ideas are being lit. And you guys are there in the thick of that. I don't know if I explained that well or not, but it's one of the tensions that we're facing. And then the other tension is congregations are often taken up by the spirit of meh, whatever. It's not atheism that's the big threat to the American church, it's apatheism. And so this is where you can call them to do something great for God, challenge them to do something amazing. Even if the most amazing thing you do is support me at $500 a month, that's amazing. You can do that. Any thoughts on conflict, tension, and felt needs?
Super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, Carrie, sorry, my dog is going crazy. She wants to tear up a dog. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but she really thinks she's tough. So I'll try to communicate this with her yapping in the background. Yes, and amen. I mean, absolutely. For 30 years, this has been really a strategy I learned, I think, from Nick Furtado. So we're going way back, but his was always focus on the fact that the university is the most strategic mission field in the world. And the reason why is because if you change the university, you change culture. And if you reach the university, you reach culture. And so what Pastor Carey is teaching you guys is right on. Obviously, you want to communicate it in your own package and your own personality, but the message to me is the most effective message on Sundays. I can see it resonate with congregation members, grandmas that you talked about, parents. They go, wow, that's what happened to my granddaughter. That's why I sent her to college and she came home at Thanksgiving and basically a changed person. And so when you can communicate that well, and then tell the story of the victory of, hey, this person was brought to faith in Jesus, or this person was saved. It's just right on, Carrie. I mean, that is what I've found in my own experience is the best way to really reach a church and grip the hearts of the congregation.
Good. And any other conflicts or tensions that maybe I missed or that you can think of?
I mean, I don't want to keep talking. I want you guys to talk too, but what you said, Carrie, okay, good. Let me just say this real quick. The tension at the dining room table, Carrie, like you're striking a nerve. I mean, you're hitting the bone. Like this is real. Parents are like, why is my daughter calling herself a man now? Why do they want to like have their body surgically manipulated? I mean, there is tension everywhere around the kitchen table and in the home. And so if you guys can show the church, this idea comes from the University of Michigan, and therefore we need to love these people to Jesus. That's a home run. I mean, man, they're going to open their wallets and give everything they have. Once they realize that what you're doing is the most valuable missionary work on planet Earth right now, they're in. So I just appreciate you saying this, Carrie. It's right on.
Yeah, and I believe it.
Yeah, I think those are kind of the three. I have like three tensions, I guess, that I talk about, and one of them is what you said about, churches get frustrated when they see their young people walk away from faith, and I refer to that as being that I'm there to protect the investment of the church, so that when you have a young person that that's grown up in your church, that's come through, nursery and elementary and junior high youth, and then you send them off to secular university, it's my job to protect that investment, help that student grow in their faith and stuff like that. I talk about that tension of that there are real students on campus that have not heard the gospel, and it's my job to share that message with them. And then I talk about international students as well, which, reaching international students, you reach the world. So that I've kind of condensed it into those three areas, and I think it kind of works.
And make sure, and those are all good. Those are good bullet points, but you need to embody them with a person now. And so with Sandhu, who's coming from India, or Teresa, who's coming from Detroit, but still has no idea about the gospel, whatever, you embody them with a person so that people will connect with that. The bullet point is the truth, but that truth has to be wrapped in a story, in some kind of person that we can connect with in the story. It's why movies aren't just bullet points. You develop a character, and we connect with that character. The character you develop I may connect that with my granddaughter, or I have a tension that I feel like we need to reach the world. Pastor, why aren't we doing more to reach the world? And you come in and say, well, the world's coming to the university campuses, and we're there to focus on them, like our leaders at MSU. That relieves that tension. And then they say, well, I can't go to MSU to reach Sandhu, but I can give and pray for you to do that. So that leads us to the next part, is that you're the hero of the plot. The redemptive element. Someone meets Jesus, and their lives are changed. You, a parent, a student, a professor. So Lance's story, one way I would think about communicating Lance's story is I wouldn't even lead. My first characters wouldn't be my wife and I. My first characters wouldn't be Lance and Ann, but would be one of those guys that harassed you when you were at Ferris to come to campus group. Hey Lance, what were their names, those guys?
Brent and Ben.
Brent and Ben. So that's what I would lead with. So I want to tell you about, pick one, Brent and Ben. It sounds like Ben and Jerry's. I want to tell you about Brent and Ben, and share their story about how they were passionate about the Lord on campus, and how they ministered to people. And they would go and they would invite young men who were searching for big answers to big questions. And they got this guy, and he kept coming, and he didn't know if he was all in on it or not. Eventually, he made a decision to follow Christ, and his life was changed. And one of those guys is standing before you today. You see how you introduce you as a character, but you lead in with Brent and Ben. And now I'm bought in. I want to know what's up with Brent and Ben. And now you open up who you are, and then Ann, and then a unique part of the campus is it's a high percentage of Native Americans. And see, this is a tension in the church where we haven't done a good job as Christians of reaching Native Americans. They associate us with bad things, which makes sense. But that's a unique part of your vision that the body of Christ has a responsibility to do something about in this generation. And we've got some hurdles there, So you have, with your heritage and with Lake Superior State, a unique area that you could bring about in your windows and in your sermons. So parent, maybe, there's someone that, Chi Alpha has been around for so long now. There are hundreds, thousands of these stories, right? A student, a professor. One of my favorite professors is a guy named James Tour. He's at, I think, Rice University, and he got saved. He's now one of the leading physical chemists in the world, and he's a very, very outspoken Christian. And he's taking all kinds of heat for it now because he's got a YouTube channel. People are starting to know him, and he's really smart. And he's calling a lot of these scientists out on kind of their bogus science as it relates to origin of life from a non-God perspective. Anyway, he was a Jew, a secular Jew in New York, and kind of got a Nino story of went to school, studied chemistry, and some kid challenged him to read the Bible. And he had a big lust issue, and then he just threw out the statement. He just began to say, Lord, if you're there. And then one night Jesus showed up in his dorm room in Syracuse University. It's a really powerful kind of power encounter that he had with the Lord. And it's how Jesus can invade that. Another guy, Vince Vitale, I think of, he's got a great story of being a seeker. And now you guys can't steal these stories because I go around and preach these. I'm just giving you some examples. He went to Princeton, and on Princeton's campus, he was a philosophy major, and he put God in the Santa Claus category, didn't think he was out there. And he was on the soccer team. Some kids on the soccer team challenged him to read the Bible, but he would read the Bible as a skeptic, and he would cross things out and write BS in the margin. But God started working on his heart. He went to 2 religion professors at Princeton. And if you're a religion professor at Princeton, I think it's a requirement that you can't be a Christian. So they told him, he asked him pointedly about the resurrection. And he said, well, as a historian, I don't really ask that question. And the other one gave some lame answer about mass hallucinations. And he came to 2 conclusions. One, that even smart people don't have all the answers. And just because you're educated, you don't often think things through. Anyway, God was working on him until one night in 122 Jolene Hall in Princeton University, he gave his life to Jesus. Now, years later, he was sharing his story in a church, and a lady came up to him who was about 15 years his elder and said, did you say 122 Jolene Hall? And he said, yeah. She said, I went to Princeton, and I was in the dorm room across the hall from 122. And every day I prayed for the boys at 122 Jolene Hall to give their lives to Christ. And I thought that those prayers were fruitless until you came and you shared that you gave your life to Christ in 122 Jolene Hall. It's a powerful, it's a redemptive element that happened there, because how many of our people are praying for people a long time until all of a sudden God answers that prayer with this guy who's now a preacher that goes around the world sharing. So
Awesome.
any thoughts on the redemptive element and you as the hero of that plot?
That was really helpful. It's given me some ideas on how to kind of change up our service pitches. I mean, it's pretty close to how I would do it, but there's some things there that I like a lot more than what I've done.
It hasn't been as focused.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, and I'll finish with this and open it up for more comments or questions. Invitation to be part of that redemption. So you tell this story, and it climaxes with this power of redemption, and then you're inviting them. You gave them a window into the world, and now you're going to invite them to do something great. Would you be willing to be a part of what God is doing in university campuses? And then however you're going to end the service end, but I think it's important because you can get individual supporters even when you don't have a church supporter. Have your newsletter, sign up out there, and then if you can get their information, you can make appeals through that. But the ask is important. Would you be willing? I need your help to go into these places. Would you be willing to be a part of this story? Something like that. C.T. Studd. Anybody heard of this guy? Anybody? It's a great story. So this guy from England was a prodigy as an athlete at 16 years old. I think at 16 he was a cricketer, played cricket, and then became professional. He was really good at it. And then he also inherited a bunch of money. So he was a superstar. Think if Michael Jordan got saved in the prime of his life and quit basketball to be an evangelist. That would be C.T. Studd's story. And so he went around the world and he gave most of his inheritance away to George Mueller and a lot of these famous people back in the day. But I love this quote. He said, "Some wish to live within the sound of a church or chapel bell. I want to run a rescue shop within a yard of hell." That's what you guys are doing. You're running a rescue shop within a yard of hell. And most Christians say, I want to be a part of that.
That's awesome.
That's all I got. What questions do you have or comments?
I think for me, the hardest part of like support raising with the church is the initial contact. Especially if it is like, now that I've, been support raising for the last 2 years off and on, like I definitely know a lot more people throughout the section. So it feels a little easier after visiting multiple sectional councils and stuff like that. But if it's someone I don't know, I struggle with how to ask for the service, like how to kind of start that conversation sometimes.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. And I don't know, I'm not really prototypical because I'm always looking for heroes in different contexts that I can support. And most pastors it's the tyranny of the urgent for them. So I don't know if I'm really the expert because I'm a guy who's looking for that, but still think, how can I invite them into my story? How can I invite them into what we're doing? I want to share with you about some great things that are happening. I want to share with you about the vision. And most pastors know, and I'll share this too, that at some point in your conversation, there's going to be an ask. I think all pastors know that. Most pastors, if they have to say no, there's kind of a feeling of failure. They realize that part of my role is to support missions and missionaries. And if I don't have the resources for that, it's kind of, I'm a failure. And so maybe part of the psychology of not returning a phone call is I don't want to have to admit that I've blown it again, that I've failed this. Pastoring's a hard job. And so that might be some of the psychology that you're dealing with, just to open the door of kind of what they're thinking. But at the same time, play the long game. Play the long game. And if you were to say, Pastor, I want to come and help you build a missions program. I want to help come elevate the vision of your church to beyond where they're at. See, that's his pain point. That's his tension. I need a church to get off their apatheism. And if you can come and do that, and you do a good job, then I think you'll see more people, serve them, but don't serve them in a way that the pastor can do. Serve them in a way that you can do by inviting them into your world and ask for you. But that initial call, yeah, I don't know. Who's the expert at that?
I don't know if I'm an expert, but some advice I'd have for you, Lance. So we may have already talked about this, through many of our conversations, but the pastors, they know why you're calling. So first of all, they understand the culture. And I think one thing I do is I try to avoid making the assumption that they're going to have book me for a service. And so I'll say things like, I'd love to come and share my vision with your church. I like what you said, Carrie, help really elevate your church's passion for missions. And I could do that either as a 10-minute window, or I'd be happy to, it'd be an honor to preach a sermon, but however I could serve you, I'm here to do that. And so I think giving them the option of maybe a window versus a full service, and especially for you guys that are younger, because you don't have that credibility yet, they might be more willing to take a shot on you for a 10-minute window. But that's something else you could do. And then also, Lance, I mean, what Carrie's saying in terms of playing the long game, if the pastor says, hey, yeah, we can't book you for a service or a window right now, I would still follow up and say, let's go to coffee. I'll drive an hour. I'll drive 2 hours. Let's have coffee. Let me share my vision and my passion across a meal with you. And if anything, it keeps you busy. And so motion creates emotion. So if you're feeling like, man, I don't have anything to do today, get out, go visit a pastor, stop by the church. You can just randomly show up at churches, walk in. Hey, I'm just here to say hi. You know, I'm Chi Alpha missionary at Lake State, but yeah, the long game, I think is really wise. And those are a couple of ways you could do that.
Jacob, you had something? That's good, Neil.
No, I was just going to say, I appreciate hearing from you, Carrie, that idea of, you know, a pastor may be struggling with by saying no. It's somewhat of a failure because and I don't know if I'm speaking for everybody or just me, for us, we would rather hear the no than the silence. Because for us, we're, you know, knocking on doors and we don't necessarily have the permission to leave until we hear the no. And so hearing the no or the not now kind of gives us relief to then move on. And I don't know. So I just appreciate that concept of, I hadn't thought of like from a pastor's perspective of, by saying no, maybe I feel like a failure and maybe helping pastors understand that, you know, from our perspective, like, hey, telling me no is okay. And we understand you can only support so many or all that kind of stuff, but hearing the no or the not now is better for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And from a pastoral perspective, if I just ignore you, I don't have to say no. And therefore I can delay my feelings of failure because I don't have enough hot chocolate for this kid today.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is coming to my mind too is that we dealt with in our the last couple of years. We had a lot of confusion in our admin office that sometimes it may not always be the reason, but there was a lot of changeover. We had one of our administrative assistants who went through cancer, and so there was always a volunteer in the office, and so sometimes messages don't always get to the person. So maybe, you know, even just saying, is there a better way to contact this person, or is there a youth pastor that I could talk to even, because building that relationship with the youth pastor is I think a huge win as well, especially if you have students coming to your campuses, or you can come and talk about your campus, and then you build that bridge to the pastor. You probably already do that, but you know, I think the last year and a half we were in ministry, our whole admin office, because of the situation, was a mess, and we were constantly dealing with a different person every day in the office. So sometimes things get dropped and it's not necessarily personal. Sometimes it is, you know, I know that they don't always call back, but.
And then when you do show up, pastors talk to each other. If you hit it out of the park, they're looking for vacations in the summer. They're looking for fill-in preachers. They're looking for those kind of things. So if you can carry the mail as a communicator, that will help. And it's a skill I had to grow in. It's a skill I continually hone and practice. And Kim and I can both help you with any of that stuff. If you come in, light yourself on fire, people will come just to watch you burn.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
Well, and I'd like to add to that, because one of my best connections with a church is a small church on the east side. And I literally filled in for him once or twice a year. And it wasn't until I think it was the third time I filled in for him that they actually picked me up for support. And it was just, you know, solo pastor. And when he needed a vacation because I think there was only one service that he was actually there for, that I filled in for him probably 4 or 5 times. But it was that third service. After that third service is when they finally picked me up as a missionary. And we had a great relationship all the way up until the time he retired a year or two ago. So.
Yeah, and that's what happened to me. I filled in for Jacob Obel, CMU, a couple years ago, and now I'm the state director.
I know he literally did, because I had to be off campus, you know, doing support raising, and so it was like, okay, let's get some fill-ins.
Yeah, well, it's Jacob's fault.
So
that's it.
He went down the list of options. He got to like 54. Oh, I'll call Wolby.
Yeah.
And I said yes.
Wait. Thanks,
one thing I would say for like some of the the younger people that haven't started raising like a full ministry budget yet. When we started last year, we had already been almost a year into support raising, and we didn't have a lot of traction at all. I think in the first year, Nino, what did I raise in the first year? Like $500, maybe.
Might be right. Yeah.
It wasn't very much compared to what my budget was. And I discovered one of the best things for us was being friends with a presbyter. So I would say get to know your presbyter and presbyters in other sections. Like Jim Riley was the presbyter that I knew really well. And because of like my relationship with him, we went down and spent almost a month probably a month of time over 3 months down in that area. And just because of our relationship, we'd go out to visit churches, and he never told us he was doing it, but we would show up at random churches to introduce ourselves. And they'd be like, "Oh, we heard you were coming." And I would never give him a list of the churches I was going to. He would just literally start calling the churches in his section. And over that month, we picked up almost $1,000 from just being friends with him. So I would say that's another big thing, is just to get to know some of the presbyters and develop relationships with them.
Yeah,
That-
show up to
yeah,
sectional events.
Yeah, that's huge. I would say I had the opposite of a problem that Lance had. So I think it's hit or miss on the presbyter, because I had talked to a presbyter in a section in Southeast Michigan, and he's like, "Well, I can't recommend anything for you because then I'd have to do it for every missionary." To which I should have said, "Yeah, like you should," but I didn't, because I didn't want to be a smart aleck. So I think you have to kind of feel it out with presbyters, because I asked like, "Hey, can you like tell me who's gonna call me back? Give me a list of people to call, that you think would be good." And he's like, "Nope." So it's just interesting how I think that works out, or
Yeah,
doesn't in my case.
Keep in
Well, I
mind.
guess
Oh yeah.
you
hold
go
on.
ahead.
Keep in mind that as a credential holder, you have every right to sit at the table at your sectional meetings. You are a Chi Alpha leader for sure, but you're still an Assemblies of God credential holder first.
Exactly.
So you show up to that sectional meeting, and when the guy says, "Anybody have any testimonies?" You have one. Tell the redemptive story, and do that every time. And you don't have to. That's a window that all those pastors are at. So yeah, I would just show up, and especially the local ones. So in your section, now this is just me talking. I always felt a responsibility to work from the inside out, Jerusalem, Judea, etc. So I wanted to support those campuses that were closest to me. And I feel like the Southeast Michigan campuses or churches should be supporting Wayne State, and
Absolutely.
Mid Central South, U of M, and Western. All those churches
Disagree.
should be supporting the Chi Alphas in their region first, and they should know you best. But whenever there's a sectional event, show up. There's an opportunity to share a testimony or a story. Go ahead and do it, and you're going to get to know people that way. But there's a seat at that table for you, and if you're not there, that seat is empty. So don't think, well, I'm just this, or I'm part-time, or whatever. If you're the Assemblies of God credential holder, there's a seat at that table, and it's got your name on it. And so make sure you fill that seat. The other thing I would say is the youth pastors in your region are sending kids to Michigan State. They're sending students to Wayne State. They're sending students to U of M. We have to get better, and I'm in contact with Raymond to try to figure out how we can build that bridge between our churches and our campuses, Chi Alphas. Right now, the bridge is basically whatever you make it to be. He has allowed us to come into camps. So if some of you guys can go to Fajola during camp week, or Lost Valley during camp week, and be a part and share, visibility. Remember, you're playing the long game. You're scattering seed. You never know what soil it's going to land on until the seed hits it. So you can look at a situation and say, well, I don't know if there'll be any good contacts at Lost Valley. You don't know. You just don't know. There could be a grandpa of a student that goes to Lake Superior State, and he's rich, and he wants to support. You just don't know. So see yourself, you're a scattering seed. wherever there's these opportunities. But even if you don't get an invitation to a church, there are seats at the table at sectional events, at camps, and also through youth pastors that need breaks as well during the summer.
So I think it's interesting because one of the things that I did was I didn't really ask for services. I just asked for like coffee or a meal to then talk about support, because I would send a letter that said, hey, I'm going to be calling you in the next week. And then I'd love to share with you about my mission, vision, and financial goals. And then I would try to get a coffee or something with the pastor. And so I didn't actually have a ton of services. And so but sometimes they would say, all right, yeah, so we're going to pick you up. We want you to come in and do a window or preach or whatever. But yeah, I don't know if that was better or worse or more effective or not. So I just
Chris,
offer that up for you guys.
That's a great strategy, Chris. And I was alluding to this earlier. If you are trying to book services, it's usually going to take a few months to get on their calendar, and that's best case. But if you get the right pastor, you could have a lunch within 3 days. So absolutely. I think some Chi Alpha missionaries focus too much on only the churches, and then they sit around thinking, what do I do? Well, you've got 500 pastors. Go down the list and take them to coffee and get moving. And so, no, I think what you did is great. And in a sense, they're kind of interviewing you, because if they don't know you and you don't have credibility and you don't have relationship, they probably aren't going to open up their pulpit to you, but they go to lunch with you, they get to know you, and then they tell themselves, I'd like to have Chris come and share a 10-minute window. That'd be great. So I think what you did is right on, and I've done it many, many times.
Yep, good stuff. That's a good picture that they're kind of interviewing you.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts before we wrap up? How's your car, Courtney? Are you going to be able to get where you're going?
I don't know yet. I hope so.
Caleb, what say you?
What's the what?
What say you about everything we've talked about?
Honestly, I've taken so many notes. I feel like I haven't really had that many church windows, and I think during support raising training, they gave us like this 5-minute outline on how to give a window, and I followed it like to the T, and everyone said it was good, and I'm like, I don't really know why it was good, but I'll take it. But after going through this presentation, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. The story part, this and that. I'm like, that's why it was good. And I think it's just been really helpful for me. I think also contacting churches and getting coffee with the pastors, I think will be really good for me, because I haven't done that much yet. So yeah, just a lot of ideas. And I especially like the youth camp idea, especially I feel like that's been on my heart a little bit, because I've kind of been wanting to do it, but I don't exactly know how to approach that. So yeah, I guess that's still
that's important. You guys should all be on those campuses, and think of it as a youth convention opportunity where maybe you're tossing out t-shirts or you're doing whatever, setting up a booth. I don't know. You guys have to dream with me about that, but we have to get better at creating that connection, because of the 3,000 students that are at youth convention or camp, only a very small portion will go to a AG college. The rest are going to go to state schools. And so we've got to, build that bridge and take time to do that. But one of the things I was thinking about that I found fascinating, as I was putting this together, I was thinking of all your stories about how, if I were you, I would do this. And so I'm thinking about Chris's story and his mom in Wayne State and the magician that came on campus. And so how I would introduce that character is I would tell the story about Andre. And Andre's story about how he came to Christ and how he became a really good illusionist and a magician, and he created these stage illusions that he sold to David Copperfield and all these people. And then one day he went to Wayne State University and he performed a show, and in the show he shared the gospel. And while he shared the gospel, Chris's mom was in that auditorium, and she gave her life to Christ. And then she was pregnant with Chris at that time and didn't abort him. And now Chris is the son of that redemptive story, and is now being sent back to that campus. I mean, who wouldn't support that? It's just amazing. But I wouldn't start with, this is me and my wife and 2 kids. I would start with Andre Cole, the magician.
Oh, yeah.
And people be falling over themselves to open their wallets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially old people. They love my story.
But I mean, it's a profound story. You're here today because of somebody's work on campus.
Someone was obedient to go and share the gospel. Yeah.
At Wayne State.
And that's at Wayne State. Yeah, that's all I say, all of that stuff.
And I think you have to also realize the value of everybody's story too. Like, even if you don't have that, that's a cool story, but if your story isn't that big, I mean, many of you are testimonies of a Chi Alpha on campus, where you live for Jesus on a university campus. Remember, the message that they're hearing out there is the universities are hopeless. And your testimony that they're not, that people can still serve Jesus on a college campus. In fact, people can lead campus ministries from that. So communicating that story is so important for the congregation to hear that, because they get sucked into, we've lost the universities, right? That's what I hear. We heard that the first time we started sharing that God was calling us upstream to figure out how to help. And, oh, they're hopeless. Okay, well, that's not true. First of all, it's not biblical. It's not filled with faith. But then you guys that have come out of college campus ministries and been served and served Jesus and now are serving other people, you are showing the proof that Christ is there and that he wants to work. And so don't ever minimize your story or let it steal from what God is calling you to do. I just really have been praying for you to have that sense of how God wants to use your stories. And they're all different. And every campus is different. That's been the best part, is seeing all of your campuses. I know we still have to get to U of M, and I need to get to Central.
U of M, is that a college?
Yeah.
Oh man, we got a lot to show you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just want to encourage you. I just been praying that. I know sometimes when you don't get a pastor returning a phone call, it can hit your heart. I just say, don't let it hit your heart. If it, that pastor didn't call you to what you're doing. You have to walk under the favor of the Lord, that he's called you to this, and trust that. That's how you stay in ministry a long time. It's trusting that God has called you to what you're doing. And I'm super proud of all of you. So.
Thank you.
All right. We're on your team. If you're putting something together and you want coaching on either the writing of it or the delivery of it, we're here for you on that as well. But anyway, let's close in prayer. We'll let you guys get on with your day.
For a car.
Oh, a car. Yes, Lord. Courtney's car. Cars are a pain. But you're bigger than that. So we pray for just your favor for all of us here. God, August will be here before you know it, and you're preparing the hearts of students, and we want to be prepared for that. And so I ask you, God, that you would perform an awakening in our churches through these campus leaders to bring hope into churches, into the lives of pastors that are struggling as well, to let them know that you're still working and that these leaders are conduits of hope on the college campuses. So we honor you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hey, thanks, Carrie. We appreciate you doing this.
All right, Lance, we'll get together. We'll chat after this. Hey, love you guys. Godspeed.
Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.